Everyone assumed she was just another civilian trying to learn basic marksmanship. The instructor handed her the standard training rifle with a condescending smile. "Let's see what you can do with this, ma'am." She adjusted the scope once, took a single breath, and fired. The bullet hit dead center at 500 meters. That's when Colonel Blake stepped forward, his face pale with recognition, and whispered to his aide. Maya Johnson had driven 3 hours to reach the Riverside Public Shooting Range on this particular Tuesday morning. The facility was known for its military-grade equipment and professional instruction, though most days it served weekend hunters and recreational shooters. Today was different. Today, the 10th Mountain Division was conducting advanced marksmanship training for their elite reconnaissance unit. Maya parked her modest Honda Civic between two massive military trucks, feeling slightly out of place in her simple jeans and navy blue sweater. She'd heard about this range from a co-worker who insisted it was the best place to learn proper shooting technique. What her co-worker hadn't mentioned was that she'd be sharing the facility with some of the most skilled marksmen in the United States Army. The main building buzzed with activity as uniformed personnel moved equipment and checked weapons. Maya approached the front desk, where a gruff-looking man with sergeant stripes glanced up from his paperwork. "Help you, miss? I'd like to use the rifle range, please. I called yesterday about beginner instruction." Sergeant Collins looked her over with barely concealed amusement. Maybe 29 years old, soft-spoken and polite. Definitely not military material. "Well, you picked an interesting day. We've got Army training exercises running all morning. Might be a bit loud for a beginner session." "That's fine," Maya replied quietly. "I don't mind the noise." Collins shrugged and handed her a clipboard. "Fill this out. Have you ever fired a rifle before?" "Once or twice." The sergeant assigned her to lane 12, the furthest from the military training area. "Instructor Mitchell will be with you in 15 minutes. Try not to get overwhelmed by all the commotion." Maya nodded and made her way to the designated lane. The range was impressive. 50 shooting positions stretching across a concrete floor, with targets set at various distances up to 1,000 meters. The military section was alive with activity as soldiers practiced complex shooting scenarios under the watchful eye of their instructors. She couldn't help but notice the precision of their movements, the way they handled their weapons with absolute confidence. These weren't weekend hobbyists. These were professionals who'd spent years perfecting their craft. "You must be my 10 o'clock appointment." Maya turned to see a middle-aged man approaching with a rifle case. Instructor Mitchell had the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades around firearms, though his civilian clothes suggested he was no longer active military. "I'm Maya. Thank you for fitting me in on such a busy day." Mitchell opened the case to reveal a standard training rifle, a Remington 700 with a basic scope. "No problem at all. Though I have to ask, what made you want to try rifle shooting? Most beginners start with handguns." "I wanted to challenge myself with something more precise." "Fair enough." Mitchell handed her safety glasses and ear protection. "Let's start with the fundamentals. Have you ever held a rifle before?" "A few times, but never anything this sophisticated." As Mitchell began explaining proper stance and grip, the military training area erupted in coordinated gunfire. Maya glanced over to see soldiers engaging multiple targets in rapid succession, their movements fluid and practiced. "Don't worry about them," Mitchell said, noticing her attention. "Those boys are showing off for their colonel. Let's focus on getting you comfortable with the basics." For the next 20 minutes, Mitchell covered safety protocols, breathing techniques, and sight alignment. Maya listened intently, asking occasional questions that demonstrated surprising understanding of the principles involved. "All right," Mitchell said finally. "Let's see what you can do. We'll start with a target at 100 meters. Take your time. No pressure." Maya positioned herself at the shooting bench, settling the rifle against her shoulder with movements that seemed almost natural. She peered through the scope, made a small adjustment to the parallax setting, and lined up her shot. "Remember," Mitchell coached, "steady breathing, gentle trigger pull, follow through." Maya nodded, took a breath, and held it halfway. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that barely registered above the ongoing military exercises. Mitchell raised his binoculars and studied the target. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Well, I'll be damned. Dead center bullseye. Beginner's luck, I suppose. Could we try a further target? Maya asked calmly. Sure, let's move it to 200 meters. The second shot was equally impressive. Then 300 meters. Each bullet found its mark with mechanical precision that made Mitchell increasingly suspicious. Ma'am, I've been teaching marksmanship for 30 years, and I've never seen a beginner shoot like this. You sure you haven't had professional training? I'm sure, Maya replied, though something in her tone suggested there was more to the story. By now, their shooting had attracted attention from nearby lanes. A few soldiers had wandered over during their break, curious about the civilian who was consistently hitting targets that challenged even experienced marksmen. Hey, Mitchell, called out Staff Sergeant Brooks. Your student's making us look bad over here. Mitchell forced a laugh. Just natural talent, I guess. Natural talent my ass, muttered Private Torres. Nobody shoots like that without serious training. Maya seemed oblivious to the growing attention, focused entirely on her shooting. When Mitchell suggested moving to the 500-meter target, she simply nodded and made another small scope adjustment. This is getting ridiculous, Brooks said to his squad. I've been shooting competitively for 8 years, and I can barely hit 500 meters consistently. The military training exercise had effectively stopped as more soldiers gathered to watch the mysterious civilian. Even the instructors were taking notice, though they tried to maintain professional distance. Colonel Blake had been observing the day's training from the elevated observation deck when his aide, Lieutenant Carter, approached with a concerned expression. Sir, we have an unusual situation developing on the civilian side of the range. What kind of situation? There's a woman down there who's, well, sir, she's shooting better than our best marksman. Blake lowered his binoculars and looked where Carter was pointing. At lane 12, he could see a small crowd of soldiers gathering around a civilian shooter. Probably just luck, Blake said dismissively, or she's had some training she's not admitting to. Sir, she just hit a bullseye at 500 meters on her first attempt at that distance. That got Blake's attention. He'd commanded elite units for 15 years and knew exactly how difficult such a shot was, even for trained professionals. Let's take a closer look. As they descended to the range floor, Blake could see the growing buzz of excitement among his soldiers. Word was spreading quickly that something extraordinary was happening at the far end of the range. Maya, meanwhile, remained focused on her shooting. Mitchell had given up any pretense of instruction and was simply observing in amazement as she consistently hit targets that should have been impossible for someone of her claimed experience level. Ma'am, Mitchell said quietly, I think you need to tell me who you really are. Maya looked up from the rifle, her expression unchanged. I'm just someone who wants to learn to shoot better. Nobody learns this fast. Nobody. Before Maya could respond, a commotion arose near the military section. Colonel Blake was striding across the range floor, his expression intense and focused. The crowd of soldiers parted as he approached lane 12. Excuse me, Blake said, his voice carrying the authority of command. I'm Colonel Blake, 10th Mountain Division. I'd like to know who's responsible for this shooting. Mitchell straightened instinctively in the presence of senior military leadership. This is Maya Johnson, sir. She's my student. Blake studied Maya carefully, taking in her civilian appearance and calm demeanor. Miss Johnson, I understand you've been hitting some impressive targets today. I've been learning, Maya replied simply. Learning? Blake's tone suggested he didn't quite believe it. Would you mind if I observed your next shot? I don't mind. The entire range had gone quiet now. Even the ongoing military exercises had stopped as word spread that a colonel was personally investigating the civilian shooter. Maya seemed unaware of the attention as she prepared for her next shot. Mitchell had set up a target at 600 meters, a distance that challenged even expert marksmen. Maya studied the target through her scope, made a minute adjustment for wind drift, and settled into position. The shot rang out across the suddenly silent range. Blake immediately raised his binoculars, scanning the distant target. What he saw made his blood run cold. Perfect center hit. Not just on target, not just in the bullseye, but dead center with surgical precision. Blake slowly lowered his binoculars, his mind racing through possibilities. In his 15 years of military service, he'd seen shooting like this exactly 3 times. All 3 shooters had been members of classified special operations units whose very existence was denied by official channels. He leaned close to Lieutenant Carter and whispered urgently, "Get me a secure line to Intelligence Division." "Now?" "Sir? That shooting pattern, I've seen it before." Carter looked confused. "Sir, she's just a civilian." Blake stared at Maya, who was calmly checking the rifle's action after her shot. "No, Lieutenant, she's not." The next few minutes passed in tense silence as Carter made the necessary calls. Blake continued observing Maya, noting details he'd missed initially. Her grip on the rifle was textbook perfect. Her breathing control was that of someone with advanced training. Most telling of all, her complete composure under pressure suggested experience in high-stress situations. Mitchell, meanwhile, had given up any pretense of normal instruction. "Ma'am, I need to ask you directly. Are you or have you ever been military?" "No," Maya answered truthfully. "Law enforcement? Professional competitive shooter?" "No." "Then how do you explain this?" Mitchell gestured at the target board, now peppered with perfectly placed shots. Maya considered her answer carefully. "Some people have natural ability." It was then that Lieutenant Carter returned with information that changed everything. "Sir," Carter said quietly to Blake, "Intelligence Division wants to speak with you immediately. They said to tell you that Operation Nightfall protocols are in effect." Operation Nightfall. Blake felt his stomach drop. That was the code designation for tracking down former members of a classified program that officially didn't exist. A program that had trained fewer than 50 individuals over the past decade, individuals whose skills were so specialized that their identities were protected at the highest levels of government. Blake looked again at Maya Johnson, seeing her now with completely different eyes. The quiet civilian appearance, the modest demeanor, the casual clothes. It was perfect cover for someone who needed to disappear completely. "Miss Johnson," Blake said carefully, "I wonder if we might speak privately." Maya looked up from the rifle, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. In that moment, Blake saw something that confirmed his suspicions. Behind the quiet exterior was a sharpness, an awareness that belonged to someone who'd been trained to see threats before they materialized. "I don't think that's necessary, Colonel." "I think it is." The standoff lasted perhaps 10 seconds, though it felt much longer. Finally, Maya nodded and set down the rifle. "Mitchell, would you mind giving us some space?" Blake asked. Mitchell looked between them uncertainly. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem at all. Just a conversation between old soldiers." Maya's eyes flicked to Blake sharply. "I told you I'm not military." "No," Blake agreed. "You're not." They walked to a quiet corner of the range, away from the curious soldiers and confused instructors. Blake waited until they were completely alone before speaking. "The shooting pattern you just demonstrated is taught in exactly one place," he said quietly. "A facility that doesn't exist, to students who officially were never trained." Maya said nothing. "The program was shut down 2 years ago after a security breach. All participants were relocated with new identities. Most of them disappeared completely." Still nothing. "I'm going to make an educated guess," Blake continued. "Someone very highly placed in the intelligence community decided you needed to vanish. They gave you a new name, a new background, and explicit instructions to never demonstrate your real capabilities." Maya finally spoke. "You're suggesting I'm someone I'm not. I'm suggesting you're exactly who you appear to be, Maya Johnson, civilian, but I'm also suggesting that wasn't always your name." The silence stretched between them. In the distance, the military exercises had resumed, though Blake could see soldiers still glancing in their direction. "Hypothetically," Maya said finally, "if someone had been trained in the way you're describing, and if they'd been given a new life for their own protection, what would happen if their cover was blown? Hypothetically, they'd be relocated again. New name, new background, new life. The process would repeat until they found somewhere they could truly disappear." Maya nodded slowly. That sounds exhausting. I imagine it would be. Blake made a decision that would have significant consequences for both of them. Miss Johnson, as far as my official report is concerned, you're a remarkably talented beginner who impressed everyone with your natural ability. Nothing more. Maya studied his face, looking for deception. Why would you do that? Because sometimes the best soldiers are the ones who get to retire quietly. The relief in Maya's eyes was almost imperceptible, but Blake caught it. In that moment, he knew he'd made the right choice. However, he continued, I do have one request. What's that? My unit could use someone with your natural talents. Not for active duty, of course, consulting work, training exercises, the kind of thing that keeps skills sharp without requiring official status. Maya considered this. Hypothetically. I might be interested in that kind of arrangement. Blake smiled for the first time that day. I thought you might be. They returned to Lane 12, where Mitchell was fielding questions from increasingly curious soldiers. The instructor looked relieved to see them return. Everything sorted out? Mitchell asked. Completely, Blake replied. Miss Johnson has agreed to help us with some advanced training scenarios, purely voluntary, of course. Outstanding, Mitchell said, though he clearly didn't understand what had just transpired. Maya picked up the rifle again, checking the scope alignment with practiced efficiency. Colonel, would you like to see what this equipment can really do? Blake grinned. I thought you'd never ask. What followed was a shooting demonstration that left every soldier on the range speechless. Maya engaged targets at distances and under conditions that challenged the limits of the equipment itself. She shot moving targets, targets obscured by obstacles, targets in rapidly changing light conditions. But more impressive than her accuracy was her teaching ability. As she worked, she quietly explained techniques and principles that even the most experienced marksman had never encountered. She demonstrated advanced breathing methods, unconventional shooting positions, and mental focus techniques that transformed good shooters into exceptional ones. During one particularly challenging sequence, Maya demonstrated something that made even Blake question what he thought he knew about marksmanship. She engaged 3 separate targets at different distances in rapid succession, each shot requiring different calculations for wind drift and bullet drop. The entire sequence took less than 15 seconds, and all 3 shots hit dead center. Ma'am, asked Staff Sergeant Brooks during a brief break, where did you learn to shoot like this? Maya paused in cleaning the rifle. Practice, she said simply. Lots and lots of practice. It wasn't exactly a lie. The afternoon session revealed even more of Maya's capabilities. She demonstrated night vision shooting techniques, showed how to compensate for extreme weather conditions, and taught advanced range estimation methods that didn't require laser rangefinders. Each lesson was delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who had applied these skills in real-world situations. Most remarkably, she seemed to understand exactly what each soldier needed to improve their shooting. She adjusted her teaching style for each individual, recognizing that some learned better through visual demonstration, while others needed detailed technical explanations. Private Wilson, who had struggled with long-range accuracy throughout his military career, found himself hitting targets he'd never dreamed possible after Maya showed him a subtle adjustment to his breathing rhythm. Corporal Henderson discovered that a minor change in his grip pressure transformed his shooting consistency overnight. It's like she can see inside our heads, whispered Private Garcia to his squad mate. She knows exactly what we're doing wrong before we do. By the end of the day, Maya had fundamentally changed how the 10th Mountain Division's reconnaissance unit approached marksmanship training. She'd introduced concepts and techniques that would improve their effectiveness for years to come. As the soldiers packed their equipment and prepared to return to base, Blake approached Maya one final time. Miss Johnson, I want you to know that what happened here today will be remembered by these soldiers for the rest of their careers. You've given them something valuable. They earned it, Maya replied. They were willing to learn. Will we see you again? Maya smiled, the first genuine smile Blake had seen from her all day. I think Maya Johnson might develop an interest in advanced marksmanship training. She might even become a regular here. I hope she does. As Blake walked away, he heard Lieutenant Carter whisper urgently, "Sir, what do I put in the official report?" Blake paused, considering his words carefully. "Put down that we encountered a civilian consultant with exceptional natural ability, someone we'll be working with on future training exercises." "That's all?" Blake looked back at Maya, who was helping Mitchell clean and secure the range equipment with the same methodical precision she'd applied to everything else that day. "Lieutenant, some secrets are worth keeping. This is one of them." As the military convoy pulled away from Riverside Range, Maya Johnson finished cleaning the last rifle and thanked Mitchell for his patience. She walked to her Honda Civic, started the engine, and drove home to her quiet apartment where she would resume her life as an ordinary civilian. But every Tuesday morning, she would return to the range. And every Tuesday, she would help train the soldiers who protected her country, passing on skills that officially she'd never learned to men and women who would never know her real name. It was, she thought as she drove through the afternoon sunlight, a perfect arrangement. The only sound was the gentle hum of her car engine and, in the distance, the fading echo of gunshots from soldiers who were already better marksmen than they'd been that morning. Some secrets, Maya reflected, were worth keeping. And some instructors never needed to know they were learning from a ghost. The Tuesday sessions became legendary among the 10th Mountain Division, though none of them ever spoke about them outside their unit. Word spread quietly through military circles about a civilian consultant who could teach impossible shots and techniques that weren't found in any manual. Maya Johnson had found her place in the world, hidden in plain sight, teaching the next generation of warriors while maintaining the cover that kept her safe. It was exactly what she'd never known she was looking for. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.